Hi, it's Gary. Welcome to today's video. Well, today's video, it's been one of the most interesting ones that I've researched so far. When I started, I thought to myself, it's going to be a really easy video. I mean, all I'm going to be talking about is time perception. But as I started digging into it, well, it quickly became a really deep subject, and there's loads of active research going on. There were a lot of sources available for this subject, and it took me ages to go through a number of them. And most of them, they went into some really technical detail, or as my wife would like to talk about it, it's gobbledygook. So what I've tried to do in this video is reduce the amount of techno-babble to keep it hopefully nice and simple. I started to work on this due to a question that was asked about why your car trips, they always seem to be quicker when you're returning home than when you're going away somewhere, even though the distance and the actual time, they're likely to be the same. Now, unfortunately, today's video, I'm not actually going to answer that question because as I started digging into this, the subject just became so deep that I thought if I was trying to do it all in one video, the video could be really long. So what my idea is I'm going to split this up into maybe two, possibly even more than two videos, which will come out over the next few weeks. Time perception, it's an active area of research by psychologists, cognitive linguists, and neuroscientists. And that's about the 12th time I've recorded this. I just could not get my tongue around some of those words. The problem that we have, it's not possible to directly measure the perceived time that something takes. Because of that one important word, perceived. Everybody perceives time differently. The best that we can do is we can design and we can execute experiments that allow the perceived time to be inferred. When we look at time perception, there's three main ranges. There's a perception of sub-second or millisecond timing. There's interval or seconds to minute timing. And then there's the circadian timing. That's the longer term. That's a larger durations. In 1993, William J. Friedman, he described two models for time perception. The first model, the strength model, this allows you to measure how strong a memory is. But there's a weakness to this because it's not possible to know how strong the memory was when the event occurred, when it was formed. So you haven't got an ideal starting point for every memory. They do vary. The other model is the inference model. And in this, an event is inferred by comparing it to other events that occurred where the date and time of it happening is known. There are a load of other lines of research taking part. One of them, it's looking at how the subconscious, it tallies a series of pulses over a given time period. So sort of like a biological stopwatch. And the research there, it's looking at that, and they've already found that we can have several of these running all at the same time. Psychologists and neuroscientists also, they think that there are several complementary systems in the body that govern the perception of time. Now, these include things like your cerebral cortex, the cerebellum, and the basal ganglia, all areas within the brain. And there are other areas that govern things like the circadian rhythm or short-term period rhythm. As part of this research, they've found that signals, they arrive at the various processing areas at different speeds at different times. And one of the things that the brain needs to do is to manage these differences in arrival and processing to fetch it through so that you have the concept of both the stimuli from maybe your eyes and your ears happening at the same time. There's two types of timing that are used. We've got the idea of something called explicit timing. That's what's used to estimate the duration of a stimulus, so how long it lasts. Implicit timing, that looks at the time that an event is expected to happen versus the time it actually does happen. These are both measured using different areas within the brain. Explicit timing, that usually involves the supplemental motor cortex and the right prefrontal cortex. Implicit timing, that usually involves the cerebellum, parietal cortex, and the left premotor cortex. Now, one of the issues I have with this video, a lot of the words in here, they're very complex and my tongue trips over So what I'm having to do is heavily edit in this video to get rid of all the times when I stumble on these words. So please be aware you may see a number of jumps in my video. There have been experiments that have been conducted on rats, and they've actually shown that a rat, it can estimate a time interval of up to 40 seconds. There's been studies carried out on vertebrate and invertebrates, that's essentially most animal types, and that they've shown that both vertebrate and invertebrate can estimate and compare time intervals and durations, and it's done in a very similar way to how humans do it. So what this really shows is that the perception of time, that was something that was developed very early on in the evolution of animals. And if we all think about it, we can usually attest that ourselves, can't we? I mean, for me, I've got a dog. She knows when 12 noon is, and she knows when 4 p.m. is. At noon, she has a lunch. At 4 p.m, we go out, we check the mail, then she gets a treat. She will consistently come to me 5 minutes before each of these events to let me know it's time. She's able to perceive the time. So what causes the differences in our perceptions of time? Again, it's another active area of research. Most of the factors they're referred to as temporal illusions. And I loved it when I first saw that phrase, because I was expecting a suited magician to walk in, wave his wand and make some time. I mean, it's these little things that jump into your head when you read things, isn't it? Well, unfortunately, that magician didn't come out. Let's have a look at some examples of these temporal illusions. They are things like a telescoping effect. This is where we think that recent events, well, they actually occurred further back in time than they actually happened. Or it could be the opposite. We think that a distant event happened more recently. Now, I'm going to mangle this next name, Virot's law. I know, I'll spell it for you, Vierordt, and I apologise for mangling it. But this law, it says that we tend to overestimate short durations and underestimate longer durations. And from a productivity point of view, I see this all the time. You know, even myself, when I'm estimating how long will something take, I might estimate that a task will take me 30 minutes. It actually takes me 10. And it's a consistent thing. So this is, again, something that I notice every single day. Intervals where a lot of things are changing, these are actually perceived as taking longer than those where fewer things are changing. So if we've got lots of things happening at once, it seems to take longer. Very similar, the length of time that a task takes. If we're interrupted a lot, we tend to think that the task has taken us longer than it actually did. It's just these little tricks of the brain. It's also been found that auditory or sound stimulus, well, they last longer than visual ones. Again, it's something really interesting that I found when I was going through this. When the strength of a stimulus is stronger, well, the duration of the event, it also seems longer. And this one, it's really easy to show by thinking about fear. When you get a strong fear stimulus, people report time as slowing down. They quite literally, it's making it look as if it takes longer than it actually does. There's another effect called the Kappa effect, or sometimes referred to as perceptual time dilation. This is where the duration between sequential stimuli being perceived, they're either longer or shorter than they actually are. Experiments have shown that our perception of time, and also space, but we're not looking at that today, it's also distorted during periods of rapid eye movement. Again, something I would never have thought of. There is active research looking at the effect of aging on our perception of time. And something I'm really interested in. Scientists, well, they currently think that as we age, we tend to underestimate a given time period. Another area, well, they're looking at how motivation can affect time perception. When we're motivated, we tend to engage more deeply with the subject that we're looking at. This often leads people into what is usually referred to as a flow state. In this state, we feel that time flows over us so much faster. And it's not just motivation that does this. It's really anything which triggers an emotional state. Let's take a look at kids, shall we? You know, if we think about it, with kids, everything is shiny, everything is new, everything is really tweaking their sense of interest. They're motivated to learn about it. To them, the time flows so fast. For adults, well, that same thing, it could be very mundane and it could essentially feel boring, which means that the perceived time, it will drag. Imagine you're taking a child to a play centre. You're going to spend about 30 minutes there. For the child, well, they're fully engaged, they're having fun, and it might feel like you were only there for 5 minutes. For the adult who sat there completely unengaged, it may feel like you've been there for 5 hours. Stimulants, things like caffeine, they can also lead to an overestimation of time durations. But on the other hand, depressants, they have the opposite effect. They lead to underestimation. And a similar thing can be seen with body temperature. The higher the temperature, well, you perceive time durations as longer than they actually are. Lower temperature, you perceive them as shorter. I've limited the research I've done into this subject, and I've covered an awful lot here, and I've done it very fast, but it's such a massive area. Over the next few weeks, I'm going to dig in further, the idea being to let me create some further videos on this really amazing, important, and impactful subject. I hope you've enjoyed today's video. I hope I haven't gone too fast so that you've been able to at least take something from the video. Please drop a comment down below. What other areas do you want me to look at where I'm looking at time perception? I've already got down to look at the one about travel times home, but I'd love to know what else I could be talking about. Please hit the thumbs up button. Every time you like, every time you comment, just helps with the YouTube algorithm. If you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel so that you can get new videos as I release them. I'll talk to you again soon.